we begin, a slight disclaimer. Writing is a long process and everyone goes about it a bit differently, some faster, some slower. This is what worked for me and my experience self-publishing on Amazon. A lot of these steps are something that if you went the route of traditional publishing, the publisher would take care of for you. Now let's get to it. Unusual is my first book. I first had the idea for it in 2008 and published it in 2020. But it was in 2012 that I wrote the first note, at least on my phone, for the story. Strange Kinship, my second book, was a faster process, taking only about 2 years. But for any story, it all starts with inspiration. For a long time, I've been really intrigued by vampire stories and watched a lot of Buffy and Angel as a teen, and the more stories I watched and read, I noticed these tales all tended to end in a similarly unsatisfying way. I wanted to change that, and my idea was born. Not every writer uses an outline, but I've learned I like them. They can be fairly short, or, as is the case in my second book, they can be fairly in-depth. Research in writing is very important, as you have to make things believable and accurate. This is a step that you continue to do as you go. For me, this meant researching things like setting, this is like Superior, what smart casual clothing would look like, different levels of light and why they might have different effects, colonial-era staircases and other kinds of architecture, naming conventions and what they meant for given time periods, and even things like what kind of illnesses would have gone around in 1510 England. The next step is to write it down and get the story on the page, which, as expected with writing, means you'll do what it says, and write, and write, and write. Which often leads to more of a side effect than a step, self-doubt. It led to me feeling anxious and wondering where I could improve. Too much of this can be crippling, but when it comes to editing, our next step, it can be helpful. This is where you polish your manuscript. Again, and again, and again. For me, I did 5 drafts for my first book total. The 5th was digital. For my second, I narrowed this to 3. One thing that really helped me to finally call it good and get over that self-doubt was an article from Writer's Digest where an author details how at some point you need to just take a leap of faith and have confidence. And with your book as good as you can make it, you'll have to decide how you're going to publish it. A book that helped me make this decision was Just Right by James Scott Bell. In the book, he goes over traditional publishing and self-publishing. With traditional publishing, it can take years, you have less control and less royalties but more support. Self-publishing is faster, you retain control, can earn more royalties, but all the book decisions are on you, including the responsibility to copyright your book with the Library of Congress for legal protection. You'll also have to come up with a book cover, which before studying graphic design was something I knew I'd have to outsource. I decided to go with Bespoke Book Covers, a company that's based in the UK. It's owned and operated by married couple Caroline and Peter O'Connor. The process of getting a book cover designed by them is pretty straightforward, filling out a few forms, a bit of emailing back and forth, and then they'll send you the proof of the design. I paid half up front and then half to receive the final file version. I left most of the design choices up to them, but I did provide them with an idea of the characters as well as that I wanted them on the cover, the setting for each book, and some general ideas like a forest setting could be cool. I also was responsible for providing all of the copy, which is the taglines, back of book blurbs, and author bio. This brings us to formatting your manuscript. This will include the front-end matter, things like the title page, dedication, and copyright pages, as well as setting up the gutters, margins, pages, headers, and footers, as well as embedding fonts, orphan and widow control, and creating an ebook file. These were some of the specs and settings I used as I went. You have to know what Amazon requires as well. And then it's time to upload what you have and get your proofs. For me, it was a fairly smooth process. One of the harder parts was actually picking out the keywords that I wanted in the metadata. Later on, a software called Publisher Rocket ended up helping me choose more productive ones. Then it was time for me to get the proofs and inspect them and make sure that everything looked the way that I wanted it to. And even if there are typos that you find, you can always re-upload the manuscript. After I had published my book, one of my English teachers bought a copy and actually helped me find a few that I had missed. This leads us to marketing, which can be a real learning curve. I ended up having 2 articles written by Linda Tyson in the local paper after being introduced through my former boss. This was great for word of mouth, as was having my books on display for purchase where I worked. For Amazon, I also made what they call A+ content, again, pre-graphic design, and this was on Microsoft Word. One of my most successful marketing tactics was using FreeBooksy and Fussy Librarian to do a free book promotion on Amazon. This is where you set your book to free and advertise it in an email listing. And while it may sound counterintuitive to pay money to give your book away, it really helps spread word of mouth and get more eyes on your book. It was through doing this that I was able to reach number 30 free in the Kindle store and rank number 1 across all of my categories, which meant that a lot of people had downloaded my book. Thousands. And people downloaded it from around the globe. But especially with marketing, self-publishing becomes expensive, and with all writing, there's usually not a huge profit to be made. It really is something you have to do just because you love it. Which brings us to reviews and the thick skin needed to endure them. I'm really grateful that most of my reviews have been positive, but you will never please everyone, and you need to be able to take it for what it is and keep going. Though the fact that Strange Kinship, at the time of this video, has only 1 written review on Amazon, and it happens to be negative, does irk me. But the very sweet letter I got from an older customer at my former workplace does a lot to make up for that. All of this is what my process and experience of writing has been so far, and as I continue to learn and grow in writing, graphic design, and life in general, I'll continue to look to the author of life to lead me as I go.